Okay, good morning. I'd like to call to order this work session on Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021 at 10 a.m. We will start this with a Pledge of Allegiance. You done. Mr. McSpadden, would you care to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, usually on work sessions we don't have an invocation, so we're gonna start this. Number 2, regular agenda items, information discussion regarding the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA discovery process. We have Dard Rolek here today. We have FEMA staff on YouTube. Huh? Oh, okay. On the phone, and so we will kick this off. Also, too. Perhaps Coral Evans with Senator Kennedy's office will be with us today on checking in, and so I just wanted to welcome her if she's here today and thank her for being in on our call. So anyway, Dart, are you ready for your presentation?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm glad to be here. And basically, I'd like to say we've been working with the FEMA Region 9 staff for some time on various issues. And now it's time they're going to do what's called a discovery and learn about needs for flood mapping, other hazards that we have, and possible mitigation measures. So it's kind of a prolonged process, and I'll turn it over to Nancy Steinberger and or Michael Bishop from FEMA Region 9, who can give you a lot better presentation on this than I can. We're glad to be able to present you this information so you know what's going on and can participate fully in it.
Okay.
It'll be a big benefit to Gila County.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. This is Michael Bishop. I am a risk analyst with FEMA Region 9. Our office is in Oakland, California. I am accompanied by Ms. Nancy Steinberg. Nancy, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Great to be part of this. Appreciate it.
And Nancy is a floodplain engineer, and so in partnership with her from the FEMA region side of things, we will be working consistently with Gila County through this discovery process. And so what we would like to do today is demonstrate to you and what we've accomplished to date, and then lay out some of the expectations of the discovery process. The purpose for our meeting really truly is to inform you and of the process itself, and then secondly, connect with you and assure you that your success in Gila County is our success. So we only achieve success if you all achieve the successes that you need at the local level or at the county level. So that's why we're here today. We have a number of other folks on the call with us to support us in presenting to you today. But we'll not go through the introductions of everybody that's on the call. They'll be listening intently and taking notes for us and making sure that we keep ourselves honest and follow through with anything that ends up being an action item that needs to be done in preparation for where we're headed. So frankly, it would be helpful for me to know how to address you. Do you all wish to be addressed as board members or Mr. or by name specifically? Is there a preference that you all have for us?
No, not necessarily. Usually you just present to the chair and board, but it's Supervisor Christensen, how do you care to be addressed today? Supervisor Klein?
I'm not super picky, so you could just say Board Member Christensen, Supervisor Christensen, Steve. Any of that works for me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
the same, Tim.
Yeah, so
it easy.
whatever you're comfortable with, we're good.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful for us. So I don't want to create an instance of offense to you all. We very much respect that you've made some time for this, and we want to be very efficient with your time and with our time in the presentation. So that helps us tremendously. I warn right now that we do not see the live feed of the slide deck, but we could go ahead and start immediately with the slide deck if you wish. If you can start it on your side, we'll be able to see it through YouTube, and then we can communicate across the slides that we have.
Okay, yeah, it's up on our screen.
I wonder if I have to do a refresh on mine.
You may need to. Our IT guy's shaking his head. Yes.
Yes, Michael, I can confirm that it is working for me, so I refreshed the link there in the Zoom chat if that's helpful.
Let me try that. I'm sorry, it's there we go. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for your patience. So as Dart had mentioned, if I may, I'll just jump right into this. As Dart had mentioned, we have been working together for, actually it's a handful of years now, and we connected through the Arizona Floodplain Management Association, or also known as AFMA conferences that are held twice a year. And so about 4 years ago, he and I met, and he had indicated that he had some specific needs in the county. And I said, well, let's work together and see what we can do. So you can think about anything that we've accomplished so far as really just preparation to get us to this point where discovery happens. And then if you need to translate discovery into layman's terms, it really opens the door for us to bring our programs to Gila County so that we can address the needs that you all have. So that's what we would like to do today, is present to you a little bit about what the discovery process is, some timelines associated with it. We'll do a review of some of the things that we've accomplished to date, and then we'll share a few other things. So if you could advance to the next slide for me. Oh, mine is freezing up again. Oh, there it is. Okay, now I see it. There's a little bit of a lag. So the things that we would like to talk about today that we're designed to talk about today are listed here. But if you have any specific questions, we also want you to know that we're here at your pleasure, and we will address any concerns, questions, and information that you need of us. So we're not limited to what you see right here, but this is what the presentation is designed around. So we'll talk about the risk map discovery process, which is all FEMA program. And it is a funding source and a service source that allows us to do the things that you need us to do through the conversations that we'll have that are designed in the discovery meeting process. I do have a slide that demonstrates what we've accomplished today, or up to date, so we'll share those points with you. There is a technique that we can apply. It's called base level engineering, so we'll discuss that today. The value of updated hazard information for mitigation actions. This is a statement just to let you know that a lot of focus is applied to making the information accurate, and the information specifically in this case might be the information that expressed on a flood hazard rate map, the flood insurance rate map. That's the firm. So the flood insurance rate maps that you all administer in the county, that's only a part of the conversation. Sometimes things jump off the page and say, listen, there's hazard and there's risk here, and somebody might get hurt. So we need to do a project here. So it can, in fact, inform the next steps. Like if you want to do a project, what is feasible to do? would be the design, and then what would be the implementation of that design. So that's the full and complete, because the end goal for our programs is to increase the resiliency of the communities, which in our definition here would be the impact of events happening are less, and the rebound after an event happens, it's faster and just creates a stronger community that can withstand greater stressors. And then at the end, of course, some of these things that we'll discuss today actually inspire questions. And so we want you to know that this discovery process, although this is a 1-hour meeting, that you can supply questions to us at any point over the coming months and years, and we will do our best to give you the best answer as fast as possible. So we're not limited to today in addressing any questions you may have of us. So we want you to know that we appreciate today in this hour, but we will stay in close communication through DART and Jerry Barnes and Arizona Department of Water Resources and others that will help any questions that you may have over time, not just today. So next slide, please, if you would. The next slide that you will see at the top, quite frankly, it says we're here to listen. So we ask a lot of questions through this discovery process so that we understand better your positions, standing in your shoes with you as a partner. And we try to ramp up really fast to understand your needs. And then we try to bring the authorities that we have to implement these programs to match those needs that you have. So that's fundamentally what we're doing here. We don't come in and tell you what you need. We come in and ask you what you need. And then we take explicit notes. We bring the notes back to Gila County and we say, please verify that we captured it correctly. Then we do program alignment, and then we do implementation of our programs. So one of the question at the bottom is, in short, what keeps you up at night? And so that's one way of looking at it. It's like if you have a hazard or a risk to the economic engine, the viability, the human safety, the safety of property, and you just, every night you go to sleep, you don't know if it's going to be there in the morning. We want to address those priorities if we have the authority and the programs to do it. We want to address those and reduce that risk. So that's a good way of thinking about how these programs might have impacts on the ground in Gila County for you all and in your lives. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide, I mentioned that DART and I met a few years ago. We've been working together, and we have accomplished a couple of things. So this slide actually demonstrates in bullet point a few of the things that we've been able to do leading up to this discussion about discovery. So back in 2017, FEMA Region 9 purchased the LIDAR after the conversation with DART letting us know that there were quite a number of studies that needed correction and or update for floodplain studies. And I said, well, these days, the way that we do that is we get very high quality elevation data collected, and it's based on LIDAR, which is light detection and ranging data. And so it creates a terrain data set that are 1 meter pixels, which is very, very high quality and far better than using the old USGS topo sheets. And so FEMA spent $551,000 and a little bit of change to acquire that LIDAR, having worked with DART to develop the footprint of the area of need. And when we received that product, we actually delivered it to the county. So you all have it for any use that you might need. There are no use restrictions. Those are your data, the public domain. Other folks can access it as well. But FEMA and our programs, we would use it to do these floodplain studies that we already know in conversation with DART and Jerry and others that are of need for the county. Another thing that we've been able to do as well, and this is a very targeted approach, and I mentioned the base level engineering piece. This, and I'll describe more about what it is and the context of the rigor that's associated with this, but essentially it's an automated approach using the engineering studies software to do studies along stream segments. And right now what we've done so far is within Gila County, there are zone A's that are delineated in, it's a polygon really around a flooding source. And they were done, I think, for the most part back in the 1980s. And so that they would be 40 years old. They used old technology. They used the topo maps. And if we think back 40 years ago, they said, you know, there is hazard here. We don't have the time and the resources to do detailed studies, the really, really rigorous detailed studies. So let's just draw a polygon around the flooding source and inform people that there's hazard here, so they're careful if they were to develop next to this flooding source. That was the idea. Show people where they should be careful if they're going to develop. And over time, if somebody's going to move into these areas and develop in these areas, they can do the detailed study at that time and know more about how they might build safely if they're going to build in those areas. Well, the second part of that didn't happen so much. The development happens, and we've struggled with A zones over decades. And what we're trying to do now with this base level engineering is replace those cartographic A zones where they just drew a polygon around the streams and introduce cross sections with flood elevations and flood elevations for multiple frequencies of flood, 10-year, 25-year, 100-year, 500-year, just all the frequencies. So folks can be informed of what the actual hazard is and design safely. So we're working on doing that for the A zones that DARD has shared with us in Gila County now. Also, there are other flooding sources that don't have these approximate A zones that are still of high interest for the county, and DARD has shared those stream segments with us as well. We haven't yet purchased the BLE for those, but we're positioning ourselves to consider doing that through this discovery process. So that's another thing that we're doing with the base level engineering we're considering. So today we've spent over $663,000 on Gila County to get us where we are today. And this is a lot like the stock market. You can look at past performance. We invest in the stock market, but we can't predict the future. So I can't promise you that any amount of funding is going to be in place in the future. But if what has happened in the past holds true, we'll be able to. And I have to say it that way because it's against the law for me to promise funds if I don't have the funds to actually fulfill my promise. So it looks good. You have me as an advocate and Nancy, and we are going to lobby for the funds in our fiscal year 2022 year to do some of the things that we'll hear through the discovery process. So we're heading in the direction. We're well prepared. We've got good track record, and we've got high expectations for what we'll be able to accomplish in the future. I mentioned the additional stream segments. There's 98 miles that DARD has shared with us. We've turned that into a GIS file if we're aware of that system, and we can share it back with the county. All of this is for the county, everything we do. And so if we needed to see where those streams are or access any of them individually, we can do so now. And we've also, the last bullet finally, we've connected with the City of Globe staff and spoke with even Mr. Homer Della in a pre-meeting last week in preparation for this. And we're all in alignment that there are a number of detailed studies within the City of Globe that also need very explicit attention to improve and correct some of the misalignments of the detailed studies that have been done in the past. So let's go on ahead on to the next slide, please.
Okay, if you could just hold just a second. Supervisor
Absolutely.
Christian, do you have any questions at this point before we keep rolling?
Thank you. No, I don't.
Supervisor Klein?
I do. So, Michael, on the City of Globe floodplain, is that considered like an A zone right now?
It's called an AE zone. It's a great question. It is one of the detailed studies. It's an AE zone, and it has all of the bells and whistles that a detailed study would have. It's got cross sections, flooding elevations, floodway demarcation, and that is would be essentially the Cadillac of all studies. is what is in Globe right now for a number of their stream segments. And there may also be a mix of the A zones as well within the city of Globe that we would, if it's necessary, we would like to address those given the budget to do so.
Okay, yeah, I had a question on that because of the corrections it needs in mapping and stuff, so thank you.
Yes, it is a great question, and it's very pertinent because Jerry has expressed to us that some of those in the around 2007 to 2012, all of the maps that were ever produced for the flood insurance National Flood Insurance Program, they went from paper to a digital format, and in that conversion from paper to digital and bringing up detailed imagery underneath it, you now see that the placement of those studies actually go up and over high topography, they essentially hills. Well, we know that that's not right, and so we have to do this study to correct it and put things where it goes. That's going to adjust where the floodplain is, and so some folks that should not be in that 100-year demarcation of the floodplain will come out. But if the floodplain shifts, some folks that are not in today, they will actually be in the floodplain. However, anybody that's not in that would be in the adjustment have been misinformed that they're out of harm's way. And so we're going to be correcting our story, information, the hazard, and looking for things that we can do to reduce the risk to those folks and correctly move folks out of the 100-year floodplain that, quite frankly, don't belong in it.
Thank you.
So, yeah, those are some of the effects that we anticipate seeing as we move down the path. So great question, and I appreciate it. This slide that we have up right now is, these are all of the aspects that we bring during discovery. These represent many of the programs. And so it's not just floodplain study, it's the planning process, the mitigation grants. So if something turns into a project and you need grant funding to do it, we would work with you to connect with DEMA, Department of Emergency and Military Affairs in Arizona, to submit a grant that would get you further down the path to implementation of a mitigation project. Of course, we're talking about floodplain studies initially, so that's the improved mapping. And we also have public outreach that we can assist with. And then sometimes to inform what project would be done, you could need a feasibility analysis and design analysis and impacts of that, of the change. That's the risk analysis tools that you see in the bottom left. So through all of this, though, it's the partnerships and you all knowing that you're not doing it alone. You have FEMA behind you. You've got Arizona Department of Water Resources. We can bring in NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the U.S. Forest Service if they have a role, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is another major player. All of these we bring through this discovery process for the authorities and programs they have, connected with what we have, and all of it connected to the needs that you all have. This is a lot to bring all at once, but that's the power of what we're talking about doing here through discovery. Let's go ahead on to the next slide, if you would, please. So on this one, I mentioned a number of these by name, but Arizona Department of Transportation is in there as well, and NOAA could be a partner if we need it. So this is just some of the partners that the federal partners, we have the authority to call them and say, will you join us? The state partners, we rely on your connections and the connections at the Arizona Department of Water Resources to bring those folks in to join this conversation and assist in any way that they can. So just wanted to let you know the vast number of folks that can contribute to this. Let's go ahead on to the next slide, please. So in this next one, this is a general timeline of the risk map process of overview. Where we are is on the left, it's the discovery and understanding of what we're to do together. once we fully understand what your needs are and how they match with the program authorities that we have, we can then assess it all, create the plan, and take the actions. And you can see, remember back from the fourth slide, we've already been taking actions with the collaboration and coordination with DARD and Jerry and others within the county. And Arizona Department of Water Resources as well have been assisting us with that. So we're already taking some, but this is going to be the rest of the effort and the formal effort that Discovery opens the gate and allows us to do. After we take the action, we deliver all of the products to the county. We update the flood insurance rate maps as is appropriate, and we take a look at the content of the information that we develop along the way, and we identify the projects that are needed and assist you in developing the applications for grants and other funding sources that allow you to implement those projects. And all of this, again, I'd mentioned that word resilience. We want to increase the resilience of Gila County through this whole process. So this process can take on the up to 7 years. It's once we start down the path, we past performance, again, we've been committed all the way to that resilience meeting at the end where we had to sit around the table and have a chat with each other and say, this is what we've done today, this is what you now have in hand, and these are the possibilities for you. And then with the momentum that's been developed over those years and the information that you now have in hand, Gila County hopefully will be set to address taking care of things and taking care of the people and the property of Gila County, for the next decade or 15 years or so, a decade and a half. And that's the design. So let's go ahead on to the next slide, please. We shared with you the general timeline, and these are some more of the specific steps along the path. And we are heading into this discovery meeting. So you follow the sinuous path around all the way to the end, which is bottom, which is the to resilience. But there will all of this. I will reiterate because it's so important. It's done in partnership. We do it with you. We don't do it at you. We don't create stuff on our own and then deliver it and walk away. We have conversations with DARD and Jerry and you all and others in the county and say, this is what you've expressed to us as needs. This is how it aligns with our programs. This is how long our programs will take to produce products that we're talking about and we anticipate. And these are some of the decision points along the way and touch point meetings that we'll support along the way. So it will allow conversations to occur when more information becomes available. And it's not black box. It really is lights on along the whole path with very specific touch point meetings where we review the work that's been accomplished to that point. So let's go ahead on to the next slide, please. I had mentioned that there are multiple levels of rigor applied to studies. All the way over to the right would be the detailed with floodway, and I had mentioned that that's like the Cadillac of all studies. And then if you look to the left, you can say it actually starts with a non-participating community, and that's not you. And then there's a community that needs study. So there's no study there. And for that, I would suggest to you envision those zone A's that we discussed earlier that were produced through the cartographic effort by somebody just trying to express that there is hazard here. Gila County also has another zone designation, a zone D. Zone D is it is one of the heaviest burden zones that anybody can suffer. And it says, just in phrasing, it says there's hazard here, but we've not done the study to even tell you where the hazard exists in this large area. And you have access with a Zone D to flood insurance policies, but because we don't know, you will pay the highest premium rates for those policies. That is very costly. That is a heavy lack of knowledge. And Gila County has those. And so in preparation for this discovery through DARD, and others may have been on the call, what Nancy and I have done is we have checked with our headquarters to get the guidance for how we might approach removing those Zone Ds. So the Zone D would then be split up into A zones that have a lot of information associated with them with the engineering models, and then the rest of the area within that zone would be an X zone, which is natural high ground or otherwise an area protected from low probability of flooding occurring. So if you get the X zones and you happen to have property in that X zone and you wanted a flood insurance policy, it would be the most preferred rate. So that distinction between the two is incredibly valuable. We can get there through base level engineering. That would be the next one to the right. Base level engineering is automated approach. FEMA Region 9 buys this base level engineering at a level that is considered mappable. So we, not just out of the box base level engineering, we buy enough rigor applied to the studies so that it can be mappable, and the mappable is in reference to the flood insurance rate maps. So we only buy it if it is mappable. It can be produced, one of the products coming out of it can be the Zone A, and on the map it would look like a Zone A, but in the database behind it, you have all of the studies and all of the outputs of cross sections, multi-frequency floods, and all of the other things that go along with it, which we'll describe a little bit later in the slide deck. So that's the target for us, is to create a Zone A that can replace the ones that are on the map now. And if we study all of the flooding sources within a Zone D sub-watershed, we can replace all of that Zone D with where the flood hazard exists in the Zone A, plus the X zones that would allow people to get very affordable preferred policy rates for the remainder of the area in that sub-watershed. From the limited engineering, we then move into something called limited detail. Limited detail is a little more than the base level engineering in that we account for all of the flood control structures and other things that influence the flooding. So we start to apply more and more rigor as we move to the right. We don't do a whole lot of limited detail. It's our opinion that if we're going to go there, we might as well go all the way to the detailed study and really apply it to where it's indicated that it's needed. So we don't do a lot of the limited detail, but it's there. And then the detailed study is what you see on the maps expressed as an AE zone with flood depths, base flood elevations on the BFE's lines, and there are flood depths and flood velocity products and flood elevation products, all done in raster. So it really brings all of the products and puts them in your hands for floodplain management for you. And again, we get to there because that informs us of where projects might be needed to protect people's lives, their health, and their property. So let's go ahead on to the next slide, if you would, please. So the next one is actually, the next few slides are about the base level engineering. Because we've already purchased some, we want you to be understand very well what it is that it is producing. And what we would like to do with it is update the flood insurance rate maps to replace all of those old non-model-backed, non-engineering model-backed A zones that were done 40 years ago. And this is what they can look like. It is a redelineation of the A zone with the very deep elevation data that was collected with the LIDAR. It does have cross sections, and then the other products that we will see as we step through will be flood depth and flood elevation products that we have. So for this, the print's a little bit small for me there. All of these data are turned over to the floodplain administrators for local use. They can be turned over to the planners for people that do the city planning and building officials, and all of your different departments can use these data to inform where it's wise to build and outside of where the hazard exists, and if there's a purpose for and a reason for encroaching on where the hazard is expressed, you would be informed on how to build smartly to avoid damages for building close to the hazards. Just looking at the bullet points real quick to see if there's anything else. Broad risk communication. You can use this for community outreach for folks. You know, why am I now suffering this increase in policy, or why do I not have to? Why is my policy price gone down? You can communicate those things very explicitly with these data in hand. So it supports that kind of communication as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. I had mentioned that we used you can use old raster data that was on the order of 10-meter elevation data, which is a 10-meter square on the ground, and one elevation is assigned, one constant elevation is assigned to that one square, 10-meter square. Or you can look on the right-hand side and see the detail of floodplains that comes out, just jumps off the page at you when you use the 1 meter base level engineering LiDAR based. It just allows us to map a far more accurate, far more precise floodplain. And from an engineering perspective, this is not the communication and expressing it to property owners and all of that, but from an engineering perspective, this is something that we stand on and support, that this is the best way to approach doing the modeling. So that's what this one is expressing to you, that the fuzzy one on the left is obvious, and then the very detailed information on the right is now what we use to base our studies on. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So I had mentioned prior that our program converted paper maps, which is on the left, to a new digital product that you can see moving toward the right as we go. The paper maps had just lines and shading on the paper, and now you can see that there's detailed imagery as a base map underneath it all, so you can see where you are at a glance. And then you can also see as we read down through the lower left what some of the products are. Again, this is all engineering backed, and it gets floodplain engineers excited to see all of these things. This doesn't translate particularly well to a conversation with a property owner that's impacted by the adjustments, but if our hearts are in the right place and we understand that this stuff is solid, it's repeatable, and it's based on best available data that we can do and the technologies available to us today, what we have to do, and our challenge is to convert that into conversation that we would share with property owners that are impacted. But we do know and feel strongly that the basis that we are starting that conversation is quite solid, and that's what we have here. So you can see that there's the 10%, 4%, 2, 1, 1% plus, and 1% minus, and then the 0.2 is the 500-year annual chance flood event. So we do multiple frequency returns. All of that information is embedded in the products that come out of this, and they're all available to you to use to inform yourself for decision making. The floodplains that are developed from these, even though there's multiple frequencies that are run, the polygons of floodplains are produced for the 100-year or the 1%, and the 500-year, which is the 0.2%. And so those are, for the program, those are significant return periods that we produce those for. And then we do water surface grids as well. A grid is a lot like the elevation data. It's at that 1 meter cell. And if you wanted to see the 1 meter cells on any individual property adjacent to a home or anywhere on the property, you select the cell and tell me information about the cell, and it will give you the elevation, the water surface elevation during a flood event on that property, what you would expect to see from the model. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one, please. So the next slide that we have for you is what we know today, what we've accomplished today and what we know today going into the discovery meeting. So the LiDAR that was purchased, and the reason that it cost well over $500,000 is because we covered a lot of the county. It was lots of square miles that were purchased and produced and delivered to you. So the ones that we are doing now, the streams, studied for with the BLE are the scope streams in the blue, and the county boundary is in the dark gray. And I apologize, I have another map that actually has the additional streams that BART had provided to us, but I don't have it on this slide. So, but these are the kinds of things that we compile going into discovery. They're the basis of the conversations that we have with Dart and Jerry and others to determine where we want to go, where it's needed first, and where it would be nice to have, the differentiation between priorities, high priorities and lower priority work. We did accommodate in the purchase of the LiDAR the opinion of the Indian reservation that said we would prefer the data not be collected here. And so we drew our project line in respect of their opinion and did not collect over their land holding. And then to the western side, I believe it butts up against U.S. Forest Service land, and we excluded collection there because it's not likely that Gila County would be developing and we typically just don't do federally managed lands or Indian reservations unless asked to do so with a specific reason in mind. So that's why we did this corridor of Gila County. Let's go ahead on to the next slide, please. Yes, I'm sorry.
Hold on, I had my mic off, I'm sorry. If you could hold on just a second, I believe Omar would have a question of you before we leave this slide and go to the next one.
Hey, Michael, thank you
Absolutely,
to you and your team for the presentation. I do have a question, and it's appropriate for this slide. Last week, I think it was Friday, we had a very interesting conversation, and it focused around the some of the areas that we're interested in that you showed on one of the earlier slides, City of Globe. And on this particular slide, we're showing the current scope of work. I wanted you to take a minute and talk on this slide about how the mapping for the City of Globe could be incorporated into the work that we're doing, how long it would take if we follow the BLE and the discovery process, and the alternatives that we have to that. What happens if a local entity wants to go at it alone to map the City of Globe area? What happens if we're a technical cooperating partner with FEMA? What are the costs and what is the time frame? There's like 3 alternatives. We wait for FEMA to map City of Globe sometime in the future with FEMA funds. I think there's another alternative, working with the local government entities, meaning the City of Globe and the county, as cooperating partners. And then there's a third that says we follow the BLE process, and you mentioned the LOMAR. And I wanted to see if you could capture those 3 ideas in terms of cost and time frame for the team here. Thank you.
yes. Thank you for the reminder. I think 2 slides from this slide is where we get into some of the timelines and the discussion of the approaches, but I can do it here. That's fine with me. And then when we get to that slide, it'll just be a refresher when we get there. So there are multiple paths to get floodplain studies accomplished and reflected on flood insurance rate maps through our programs and through the National Flood Insurance Program, just specifically. But RiskMap is a program underneath that program that allows this conversation and discovery to happen. So let me start with the program from the FEMA perspective, where a community says these studies need to be performed, we want detail, and we want the flood insurance rate maps to reflect those detailed studies. So FEMA, through Discovery, would get the start and stop of the study extent on the specific flooding sources through the Discovery process. In between Discovery and our annual procurement cycle essentially starts through the summer months, where we gather ourselves and the information and prepare it, and into the fall and winter, when we submit to FEMA headquarters for a budget request. That budget request is considered. It's matched against all the other 9 FEMA regions, so there's 10 FEMA regions in all. That budget request is submitted to Congress. U.S. Congress decides how much money this program gets. If they meet our budget request, then FEMA 9's budget request is met, and Gila County's request for studies of FEMA Region 9 is met. So when we do that, we find out around January, February of the next year. So let's use current time as our reference. So Discovery, we would conduct it in April. Through the summer months, we would verify that we heard everything correctly. You would help us with that verification. We would submit a budget request in the fall. We would hear back from whether or not the budget is met in January, February. We would then work through a few months and a few specific contracting steps to get the money in place. So we would have to identify the contractor that would do the work. FEMA would pay for it. The contractor would be typically in place around August, September, October. We would have a project kickoff meeting. We would do all of this in partnership, as I had mentioned, with Gila County, so you'd be tracking with us through all of this. So that would be October, let's say October of 2022. The contractor would then do the survey work that needs to be done, the desktop analysis that needs to get done, and the field survey, and then use that information going into the hydrology work. And that, I'm talking about a detailed study here, which is my understanding of what Globe needs. So this is the Cadillac of studies to get that right through the city, so they're informed and the information is accurate and precise. So I think they might need on the order, Nancy, I might lean on you for this timeline as the reminder, but I think it's about...
Sure, yeah. They actually pulled up the slide on the YouTube so you can see the schedule that that we prepared for it. So I had a couple years for data development, which is...
Okay. So if we start in fall of 2022, the risk map review meeting. So yeah, so it's hydrology and hydraulics are the 2 engineering approaches that are applied. We call it H&H for shortcut, but it's hydrology, which is where does the water flow and how fast, and then hydraulics is where does it go if there's that much water passing through the physical constraints of the landscape, essentially. So, and that produces a work map that comes out in the fall of 2024 on this scale. And then there would be a meeting with all of you, so we all review those products, and we have discussion, we make adjustments, we do refinements. When that's refined to our satisfaction, then we create the preliminary products, the preliminary flood insurance rate map products. And those would be, if everything goes well, those would be issued in fall of 2025. So given another year to get through all those conversations, the corrections, the adjustments, preferences, the preliminary maps produced, they would be released fall of 2025. When they're released, there is another touch point meeting that I had mentioned earlier. It's called the Consultation Coordination Officer Meeting, CCO. It's actually easier just to say CCO and to remember what it stands for. But that would be winter of 2025. And then after that CCO meeting, there are 2 newspaper publications, and significance of the second one is that the second one in the local paper, the second publication, is the start of the official appeal period. So it's warning that the appeal period is coming for these maps, and at the release of the second notification, it is the start of the appeal period. The appeal period is 90 days, so you have 90 days to review it, and the community members also, all the landowners, property owners, businesses, they also have that 90 days to review and comment on what they're seeing on these updated flood insurance rate maps. That ends in 90 days. If there are any, there's two levels of contribution that can come in from the community. Comments, which are their folks are thanked for, and then appeals, which is engineering technical data that contradicts what's on the prelim maps. We would have to resolve the appeals, and we do our best to accommodate the comments. And when that comment resolution period is finished, then we do the LFD, which is the letter of final determination, which starts a 6-month period where the ordinances for all the communities impacted by the updated flood insurance rate maps, the ordinances are reviewed in preparation for adoption of the maps at the end of that 6-month period. And at adoption, they become the regulatory products that are administered to by the flood insurance by the floodplain administrators for the county and the communities. So, and that would be summer of 2026. So that is the FEMA purchase path, and those are all the steps along the path. Most of these steps need to be respected through all of the paths. And I say that because through the LOMAR process, it's strongly suggested that you inform the community that the maps are being updated for, say, the city of Globe, and would allow them a period to review it and comment, and then those comments to be resolved as well. But the LOMAR doesn't always have, Nancy, I think that's right, it doesn't always have that community evaluation step. It might depend on the LOMAR itself and the significance of the LOMAR. But the City of Globe is big enough that we would strongly suggest that you allow the community to know. So if you're okay with that normal process, the FEMA prospective process, let me now discuss two other paths to here. I'm trying to figure out what's the most logical one. Let me do the CTP because I think that one reflects this, but injects one other component. The CTP stands for Cooperating Technical Partner. That is when the community is funded by FEMA through a grant program. We give you the money, you hire your contractors, or you do it in-house, but you do the H&H work and the survey work and the work map production work. You get all the way to what we're looking at on this schedule, to the flood risk review meeting. You get to that point where the work map is produced and you supply that back to FEMA, then FEMA picks it up and does everything through preliminary and LFD to effective. We cover that second half. So the grant that you would ask for would be asked for to get you from initiation of the study update process to the flood risk review meeting step. You would have to estimate, you have to do a few things. You have to estimate the cost and get it in the ballpark of what it would cost for those studies to be done. And then you would have to administer the grant as well. And there is labor associated with administering the grant. You've got to report monthly to one of our systems of record. You have to report quarterly to another system of record. And then when the products are done, you have to push the products to a third infrastructure where data are stored. And so all of those would be your responsibility. And when you sign into this partnership, you're held to that promise that you would behave in those ways. It doesn't shorten the path, the timeline at all. What the CTP program does is it allows you to make the engineering decisions locally and direct your contractor to build it to your preferences, but in the end, the studies all have to meet the FEMA standards, the data capture standards, regardless. So you have to do all of the same steps that FEMA would do. That's the difference between FEMA buying it and you partnering with us and helping us make decisions along the way, or you taking the responsibility to get to the work map stage and doing all of those, all of that internal decision making on your own internally, and then producing products that meet FEMA standards. There is this other piece. If you deliver it, we do a quality assurance, quality control review of what you've delivered. And if it doesn't meet our standards, we send it back. And then you have to go back to your contractor and say, contractor, it doesn't meet these standards in these regards. You have to fix this so we can deliver it and finish this delivery. And so all of that becomes your responsibility on your end. Okay, that might be a lot to take, but let me pause see if there are any questions on the difference between the FEMA handling it with you or you handling it as a CTP up to work now. Is that all clear so far?
Thank you for that. Any, Homero, you have any questions on the difference between the two?
Thank you, Chairman. Michael, thank you for that explanation. So, in your mind, and in the processes that you're aware of, what would be the quickest way for the City of Globe to remap the floodplain and correct what we believe to be obviously incorrect? Is it the LOMAR process? Is it that the LOMAR would be included in the BLE work that you would be doing, or is it some other process to make corrections to updates to the City of Globe floodplain map?
Okay, that's a great question, and thank you for the reminder. The LOMAR process, I'm going to use past tense on this one, Mr. Bellot, thank you. The LOMAR process is a process that was available and has been and continues to be available to you all to hire your own consultants and produce those products and submit them as a LOMAR. That could have been done anywhere in the past. And it has not, and so if you're asking for my opinion, I think the fastest path today from here forward is for FEMA to buy it and not put in the additional complexities of the CTP program. If you don't have the machine that manages CTP grants in place now and have all of the experience that it takes to administer the CTP program, there's a learning curve associated with that requires effort and time to become familiar with it. You compare that to FEMA having the machine and the momentum to buy it and get it moving fast. So I think the fastest path is for FEMA to buy it, not through the CTP program. Now I'm going to transition now to discussion of the LOMAR. And then I'm sorry if I've confused you all with the BLE. The BLE is an approach to do A zones, and because the limited level of rigor that's applied to the BLE and the need for rigor in a complex urban area like the City of Globe, BLE is not applicable for the City of Globe. However, the detailed study methodology is absolutely applicable to the City of Globe. So I wanted to clarify those two things. BLE is not applicable for the City of Globe for the needs that the city has. The detailed study is. So we have to go full rigor, all products, and detailed study. The fastest path to get that done, in my opinion, is going to be FEMA buying it with your partnership, helping us get through the steps in the decision-making for preferences and things along those lines, but lights on and everybody around the table monitoring as we go down through the path of getting work completed. The other component of all of this, and this is where LOMAR comes in, LOMAR has a limit to the number of panels that can be touched and still be produced as a LOMAR. And right now, our running guideline with FEMA headquarters established as guideline is 15 panels. Compare that to the City of Globe, and where the interest in the City of Globe is. The City of Globe, from our conversations last week, appear to be interested in the update of maybe 4 or 5 panels only. So you're well within the limit of the LOMAR. The submission of, this is where the timelines differ. The timeline that Nancy pointed out for us earlier is the PMR, the Physical Map Revision Process, which is the full process, full communication. The LOMAR process is faster than that and can be faster than that. Because it's dealing with just a handful of panels, we can step through. Some of the steps are statutorily set in the amount of time it takes to get through them. That's the fastest path, is we have to go through those steps. But the LOMAR, if you were to do the detailed studies, get the work map, produce the preliminary maps for the City of Globe, and it were to be produced in such a way that it was intended to be submitted as a LOMAR, that LOMAR submission is done online by the community to FEMA headquarters without FEMA Region 9 in the way. And then FEMA headquarters processes that as a LOMAR, and it can be faster to get the maps updated. The timeline that we saw with the PMR, I would suggest, is probably more appropriate for application for the other panels in the county of Gila and other communities in the county of Gila to go along the PMR path where you exceed 15 panels. We might end up doing 16 panels. We might end up doing 100 panels of update. I don't know yet. Discovery will inform us of that, but that would be the difference. Is it splits when you have the work map in hand, and you can take a limited number of panels and submit it to FEMA headquarters for LOMAR quality assurance, quality control review, and acceptance in LOMAR. Now, we will send it back to you, and they'll say, correct these things, and we can move forward. So you still have to go through that QA/QC process and do the corrections. It's a little bit faster doing it that way than it is going through the PMR process, the physical map revision process. So if you go the LOMAR process, I think we can, it's a community-initiated process, and the cost would be associated, the cost of submission would be associated with, likely associated with the community. If there's exceptions to that, then we need to dig deeper into what those exceptions are, in where the cost is applied, either FEMA pays for it or the community pays for it. I'm not clear on that today. If that's still of interest, we would have to dig deeper and find out more and inform the circumstances that would allow it to go one way or the other, dictate which way it goes to be most efficient. So that's, but if we, Nancy, do you remember if we went through the logic of this being submitted as a LOMAR following the risk map review meeting in fall of 2024, about, is it a year? Does it take a year off the time, or a year and 3 months?
Essentially would remove the compliance period. That 6 months after LFD wouldn't be necessary. There would still be the 90-day appeal period, though. So
okay,
it would shave off 6 months. But if the real speed would be gained if the community were to, like right now after this, decide, hey, Globe has some big issues, looks like FEMA can't even get started for a while, let's hire a contractor, let's do our own study, and let's submit a LOMAR like right now. That would be the fastest way to handle known errors that the community can fund themselves right now to correct. That would be the community-initiated LOMAR process, which again, Michael mentioned that you could have been doing this, previously. You could start it now. You could start it at any time in the future. That's the community's opportunity to correct mapping errors.
Yeah. So the two places that we just heard are at the beginning, which is initiation of the study work, which could be funded by FEMA or the community. And if you have the money in your pocket, you go, I just want to get this done. You could start as fast as you can get folks started on it through your processes. not related to at all. So you do the hiring or you do it internally, and you can start immediately. You can shave the start time off. And then at the end, the compliance period after LFD is a 6-month period that the PMR process has to go through, shave that off as well, apparently. So those are the two places to shave time. So Nancy, thank you for reminding us all of those specific details. And Mr. Bella, I think that is what was in my mind to express, I think, to address the questions. If I've missed something, I welcome your correction and reminder to address any points that I may have missed.
No, I think that's fine. I do believe Supervisor Klein has a question for you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sure.
Michael or Nancy, did either one of you would have a ballpark figure what a cost would be to correct this in Globe?
Our estimates are based on stream miles that we just fundamentally get down to that, and we have a couple of rules of thumb on how much it would cost to do a detailed study per stream mile. And it's a wonderful question. I can't remember what that dollar figure is, but if you will allow me to circle back and submit it to you, I can find it out before the close of business today.
Sure, that'd be great. If you could, you can just send it to Homer, and he can get it on to me. So
that would be great. Yes, I apologize for not. I just can't spit it out of my head. But our program manager, he's got one of those minds that it just comes out of his mouth when you ask it. So let me check with him. His name is Patrick Clancy. He's a colleague of Nancy's and mine, and I'll get it into your inbox, Mr. Homer. We'll get that information for you. So it's going to be stream miles based, and if there are any other influencers on that cost, I'll be sure to add those in and articulate that so you understand where it's coming from and what you might expect if you were going to look to buy it.
thank
Okay?
you.
Yeah, and if you could get that information to the entire board, it would be appreciated. And I do believe we have a question from Mr. Jerry Barnes from City of Globe.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity. Michael, I appreciate everything we talked about. It explains it better. My boss is sitting in the audience as well, so it explains it to him. But, one of the things that the City of Globe was really interested in is making this final mapping precise. We don't think that anything but the detailed will get us there because we haven't accounted, I don't think, for the diversion tunnel and the diversion dam or the retaining walls that go through the city, US 60. I don't think any of that's been accounted for in the original flood insurance rate maps. So we are finding issues throughout the city as far as a shift. We have had a couple of loamers done. Holiday Inn was one, and a couple others as well. People who are moving forward with their development have pushed through with their own engineering firms to do loamers, and which gets them through that process. But I don't know that it precisely gives you what is in the City of Globe, because I don't think those accounts have been taken on, especially like US 60. That it created a dam in that area, and I don't think it's ever been accounted for. Where when this shows my age, but back in the late 70s, early 80s, I actually worked on that with the Department of Highway, Arizona Highway Department. So I don't think those things have been accounted for. I think just by doing, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, just by doing spot loamers throughout the city, we're not accounting for all these other storm diversion and so forth throughout the city, correct?
I believe, just not knowing except what you've told me, I would assume that what you're saying is correct, that I think a comprehensive study of all of it at once, accounting for diversions and tunnels and any structures that influence where water goes. We have to temper all of that with what program allows and doesn't allow for the study process, but I would strongly suggest that a comprehensive study, studying it all at once, is the way to go. And I'm anticipating that the application of a 2D model is probably appropriate. It's, again, it's the engineering piece, but I think accounting for the survey of all those structures, the carrying capacity of those structures, influence of where water goes from the structures that we can account for, will produce a better product than doing piecemeal LOMARs. Yes. And so, but if we did, just adding, go back to what we were saying before, if you did a comprehensive study that impacted 4 contiguous flood insurance rate map panels and updated it all at once and accounted even for the LOMARs that were done in the past, that's one way or the other. They're either going to be, left in or superseded by the new study, but all of it would be accurate and precise, I believe. I think we can improve everything across the board through this process, is my opinion.
I think that's where the city is. We want to make sure that whatever we produce is accurate, because as Michael said earlier, you might be taking this property out of the floodplain or the floodway, but you might be putting another in. So we need to be able to stand on that and say, this is done accurately, and this is what we believe to be true. This process is greatly appreciated because the city has done quite an outreach for economic development, and this has stymied it some. We've had developments that came in as soon as they found out properties were in the floodplain or even the floodway, they've backed out. We've had a few that moved forward, but I think that this remapping is great, and I appreciate the opportunity to partner with Gila County and to partner with FEMA as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes, for bringing that information up, because I think, the diversions and things that have been put in are going to make a big difference on some of those properties, I do believe. Okay, Michael, did you want to continue?
Yes, I think we're toward the end here, so if you just go to the next slide for us, please. In my records, it looks like this is the final slide. So
Probably it's back one, because we skipped one to get to that schedule.
Oh, I did? Okay, yeah. Slide number 13 then. From this one, if you back space twice, please. I think we're essentially done. I mean, we've covered the contents on this, and this is just a reminder slide for us that what we intend to do through this process is create updated, accurate, precise data for everybody to review and improve the expression of hazard. And then we didn't do this definition. Hazard is what happens when rain falls on the ground and it collects and starts to flow. Risk is what happens when that hazard intersects with people's health, and people's property. The risk is to the people and to the property. And so that's the difference between in vernacular. That's the difference between those two things. And our concentration is get the hazard right so we understand the risk better so we can do something about the risk piece to keep people safe. So that's what we're doing. We mentioned the collaborative nature of this, and we understand that at least for the City of Globe, but not limited to the City of Globe, there's this impetus on getting things done to improve the accuracy and get it done as quickly as possible for you, because as Mr. Barnes was explaining to us, it's impeded some potential for economic gain for the community. But that can be expressed in the county, it can be expressed in other communities in the county. And so it's important for us to do what we do it well, do it right, do it in partnership, and do it full and open communication with folks. And I would only temper that with deliver it when it's ready to be delivered and when we're ready to stand behind it. If we deliver interim products that are likely to be altered, we spend a lot of time explaining the interim product before we get to the end. and that takes bandwidth away from us from getting to the end. So just a caution there in my experience. And then if you would please, let's just go ahead and advance to the last slide. And what we would like for you to take away from this is that Nancy and I will consistently be connected to this part of the process and this communication with you. We have other team members, Ms. Patricia Ripley and Ms. Mira Hahn are from another branch within our division. Essentially, Nancy and I will work together to develop the studies and the MAP products. And then once the MAP products become, after that LFD, that if you remember that, after they become effective, the floodplain administration is to be done to those regulatory products. These are the folks, Patricia and Mira are the two that assist with the implementation of the regulatory components of the program. So they're downstream from the work that we're talking about doing and getting the maps updated. But when they're updated and in place, they have tremendous depth of knowledge in how to administer the program with updated regulatory products. And they're on our team. And my point is that we are the team from FEMA Region 9. We are at your service, and we want to do the best for you and with you that we can over the coming months. And so with that, I will gladly let you know that your allyship is incredibly important to us. If we can partner with you, if we have your support in going down this path, it will allow us to do more and better for you than if you didn't see the value in what we were bringing to the table today. And we have more communities than we can address. We're a very small team. We've made some great headway in Gila. We'd like to continue down this path. We think there's value for you. But at any point it ends up being of no value, let us know. There's a stack of communities behind this that we also have to address, but we can only do them one at a time. Not one at a time. We actually do like 6 or 7 at a time, but you're at the top of our list. And so we want to just make sure that we listen to you, hear you, join you in this effort, and deliver the things that you need that our program gives us the authority to deliver. So with that, gentlemen of council, I really, truly appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. We are here at your pleasure. I will stay on as long as you need me. Nancy will do the same, and the rest of our team. But I'll turn it back over to you for any final comments or questions that you may have of us.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Christensen, questions, comments?
Thank you. Thank you, Michael and Nancy, for the presentation. It's a little overwhelming, a lot of information. So just to remind me, for my own information, we haven't had a study done in about 40 years. So this is going to be something that we need to update that 40-year-old stuff. What happens to a property if it suddenly becomes in the floodplain or floodway when it wasn't prior to that? I would think that would be pretty devastating to the value of the property.
That is an absolute consideration, and the best way in our experience, the best way to address that is to be compassionate, be present, be with them. They'll have to work through some of the information change for sure. Our programmatic position, which is not a very emotional position, but our programmatic position is there is flood hazard here and you need to know it and protect yourself. And through this program, we also have means for you to protect yourself appropriately. And for that, we typically go to the conversation of we do offer flood insurance policies, and it is a good idea. The property value piece isn't something that the program addresses specifically. It recognizes. It does specifically recognize it, but it doesn't do anything other than what we're expressing. The programmatic concern is we don't want anybody physically hurt by this hazard. We want you informed of the hazard as we understand it today with the best up-to-date information that we based it on and the techniques. and we want you to protect yourself financially by getting appropriate level of insurance should something happen, damage your property, including things like an evacuation route. If something happens, what direction is it going to come from, and how are you safely going to get you and your family out of there? We need you to know all of that stuff. That is the fundamental conversation. Secondly would be, there are things that you can do in terms of projects that also protect you from damage, and that would be, and also influence the insurance premium. And that would be create freeboard between the modeled base flood elevation and first floor elevation of the structure. So there are also programs that elevate properties. By properties, I mean the structure. So if you know that the 100-year flood would produce a flood elevation of 100 feet above sea level, and you can raise your property 2 feet above that, then if should a flood happen, the water doesn't actually get in and even soak the carpet of the floor, let alone do damage up the wall. But you have to understand that there's a lot of considerations in that. What would it take to raise any individual property? What is the building design? And what is it? There are considerations that are appropriate, and then is there county support, community support for raising these properties? Other options are retreat. You know, you have a large property, the floodplain impacts this half of it, but not that half of it because it's uphill. There might be relocate the house further away from the flooding source. They seem like drastic measures, but they're safety measures that are part of the conversation that happen in the mitigation of and risk reduction. So that's essentially it. It was probably a lot more answer than we may have been intending to receive from me, but those are some of the conversations that we have with folks.
Yeah, I appreciate you being thorough. Thank you for that. Now, help me to understand how FEMA determines a 100-year event or a 500-year event. And for instance, if someone, is that speculation? Is that just some sort of a formula you do? Or, I mean, do you know that in 500 years it's going to flood this way, or that it flooded that way 490 years ago, so it's going to flood that way in 10 years? I mean, it seems slightly arbitrary to me, the different numbers.
Yeah, it's a great question. The program had to pick a level, and the use of 100-year, 500-year is really, it's a misnomer, but it's convenient for us. If we go back to, and I'm not saying let's go back, but in the slides that you have, there's a reference to a percentage probability of the event occurring. That's the 1% chance and the 0.2% chance. So if you convert and rearrange the units, it ends up being something that resembles the 100-year and 500-year. The probability, though, is present every day. So there's a 1% chance every day that this flood level will be exceeded. That's where the 1% comes from. And that 1% was a statistical selection by the program when it was initiated back in 1978. They said, let's just put on a map the 1% chance of an event being exceeded, create the distribution of the area that would be inundated by that event using these engineering techniques, and we'll build the regulations around that 1% annual chance flood. So that piece, you can go back and argue was arbitrary, but it's been arbitrary now for 60 years, 80, it's 50 years, something like that. So, but it is the way the regulations, Code of Federal Regulations, and the basis of the National Flood Insurance Program are built on that being the regulatory event. The 500-year event, which is the 0.2% chance. So if you think of 100%, that 0.2% of 1% at 0.2% chance that a flood of that magnitude will happen and be exceeded is what that 2% or 0.2% chance is. The other frequencies that were mentioned would show you that the high frequency events, the ones that reoccur routinely, like the 10% chance, 4% chance, you know, or it'd be the 10-year and converted to the 10-year, 25-year, 50-year events, those kind of things. It's easier to say than the percent chance of being exceeded. But it's just a conversion of that probability converted to terms that are easier to say. If you have a flood event that's, if we call it the 100-year event, you might think, okay, it happened once, it's not going to happen for another 99 years. That's not the way to think of it. It is an event that has a 1% chance of happening any given day of the year. That's fundamentally where it comes from. But we use that 100% or that 100-year storm event as a misnomer, but it just allows you have exposure to that event happening any given day of any year. And 2 days in a row, 2 days separated by a week, it could happen again. It's just a probability of the event happening.
Okay. All right, thanks. That helps me understand. That helps me understand that. The other way of saying that is, it's every day you have a 99% chance it's not going to happen. So
that's correct.
We would have to look at, I guess, our ordinances regarding building on the different floodways, floodplains, and stuff to see how restricted they are on something that may not happen 99% of the time. So that would be just a curiosity to me. Thank you, Michael, for that.
Okay.
You're welcome. And with this information that we've developed, if you build there, then it will inform you how you might design and elevate the first floor elevation to your comfort level, to your tolerance of risk level, so that if an event did happen, it might pass without consequence, without the damages for building at grade. If you raise it 18 inches, then you might avoid the damaging floods that pass through a building in an 18-inch elevation of the pad or something. It would go around the building. It's that kind of consideration that you'll be informed to do to meet your tolerance in design and development with the information updated.
Thank you, Michael. Supervisor Klein.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe I have any questions. I got a lot to absorb already, so I think I'm good. Michael, I want to thank you for the presentation, you and Nancy and the team, so I appreciate it all. Thanks.
It's been our pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, I've had a lot of questions, but as other questions have been asked and if you've spoke, I've been crossing out questions that I've been writing down on my scratch paper. There's one question that I did have, though, as you said that Globe is at the top of your list, and we have multiple representatives from the city of Globe here. But I was also wondering, too, also on that list, does that include Claypool and Miami? Because in my opinion, it's kind of all lumped into one deal. And so when you said Globe was at the top of the list on going forward, does that also include Claypool and Miami?
That's a great question. I may have misspoke. Gila County, this Gila County discovery process is what allows us to address all the communities in Gila County, including Globe, Miami, Star Valley, Basin, and the unincorporated county. You will let us know where your hotspots are, and we'll put those at the top of the list of things that we want to accomplish, and we'll estimate the cost and submit our budget request to address as much of it as we can. So if I said Globe is at the top of the list, what I meant was Gila County and Globe and Star Valley and Miami are all at the top of our list. You all before us and the team that you're speaking with today, we're dedicated to get as much of this and lobby for as much of this as we can do that we just actually discover is of importance to the county. So I think I hope that addresses your question.
It did.
I know you want Globe to move fast. We want all of Gila County. We want to, my personal preference is to do all of it if I can. I don't know if I can do all of it because I can't promise today what I'll be able to do with what budget request we submit. If we put it all in and we ask for the budget that does it all, the task then becomes managed work. I hope that for all our sakes, we just get this down to just the work part, which is challenging enough. So I'd like to get this budget request piece out of the way so we at least know how much of it we can do, where we can do it, and then we can add the timeline for expectations.
Thank you. I believe we had a question from someone who will introduce himself to both of us.
Thank you. My name is Talmadge Hansen. I'm a on-call engineer with the City of Globe. And I'm with Steve. This is a lot of overwhelming information, and I'm an engineer who's heard this a couple times. So I think we're all kind of trying to figure this out. Michael, we spoke before. Can you clarify something for me? A couple things. This PMR study, you gave us the timeline for that. That will result in the detailed with floodway model for the City of Globe, correct?
Verify, yes. If we go that path, the end result will be updated flood insurance rate maps for the City of Globe. Yes.
With structures, with diversion dams, with all that stuff that we would get if we did it in-house with just, you know, the third option you gave if we did a Lomar. We'll get all that detail.
Regardless of the path taken, all of those things should be taken into account for the results to be as accurate as they can. So if the CTP does it, if you do it in-house, if FEMA does it, it should, all of that survey component, the field survey, is going to acquire the information either from as-built or go to the field and actually survey those structures to make sure that they're accounted for appropriately, and they'll be stitched into the engineering modeling, and the models will be run accounting for the impact of them. Yes.
Okay, so Globe currently has one of these Cadillac studies, right? With that, but as we understand it, it doesn't include that detail in it. Is that? I don't understand. If we already had that study done, why wasn't that detail included in the diversion dams?
Great question. I don't have the answer to why decisions were made the way they were done on the current detailed study. I would just offer to you that if we're going to address it and correct it, that forward, that we would account for it. I'm anticipating accounting for it. Nancy, I can't imagine why it would be ignored unless you've experienced something in your career. It's just functional.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in real quick. So there are, FEMA has guidelines and standards for how the hydraulic model is prepared and how the mapping is done. So we'd have to make sure that, and Michael's correct, whichever route it goes, it still has to meet FEMA standards. So certain underground structures, like a local storm sewer system, wouldn't necessarily be included in the floodplain modeling. Often you're assuming that the storm drainage system is overwhelmed at the time of the flood. If you do have a dedicated flood control facility that was, designed to handle flood events, then that would be something we would evaluate to see if it should be part of the model or not.
Yeah, we
so
do.
I guess just one caveat on that. It has to be considered, case by case as to what the structure is. And then someone mentioned retaining walls. You do run into an issue with anything that would be like considered a levee. If it's something that's a certified levee, we can consider it. If it's not a certified flood control structure to act as a levee, then we wouldn't be able to consider that in the model. So there are, as we dig into this, and we can discuss it more at the discovery meeting, what kind of facilities you're looking at, and go through the FEMA standards with you guys at that time to see how they would be handled.
Okay. I won't dig into that here anymore then. The only other thing that stood out was that you said in 2007 through 2012, the model wasn't updated, but everything was converted from paper to digital, and that shift is what's created problems with properties that are obviously not at the bottom of the creek, but it's, the creek is out of the floodplain, but the building next to it is in. Is there any way we can just fix that shift of that happened instead of redoing the model? Like, the model's going to take, we're looking at 5-6 years. No, we definitely want the detail. I'm just wondering, that shift, is there any faster way to just fix the shift that happened? That seems like something that doesn't require a lot of effort as much as a new model would.
There is a method for correcting obvious shifts and systemic shifts. But Nancy, what I'm thinking about is the correction process. But we have to, Talmadge, we have to dig in deeper to understand if it's systematic and consistent and unidirectional and unit vector. If it's the same direction, same distance, there may be a way, but I don't know. If we dug into that, I can't promise what the outcome of that would be, but it's certainly something that we could look into. Nancy, do you have anything more to add on that specific topic?
Yeah, that's a question we definitely need to look into, because if it's a consistent shift that it was just slid over, then it might be relatively straightforward to correct. But the problem is if other things have changed on the ground, and now that we have the new LIGAR, we'll be able to know that. That's what we really need to make sure that's going to be the most accurate information. If it's a consistent shift, we might be able to slide it over, but it's probably still going to be out of date and worth restudying, since it sounds like the studies there are really old.
It's just a longer process. Yeah, it's just 6 years till we get that. I was just wondering if that was an interim solution to make it better until we get the accurate model. But that's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Talmadge. We don't know the specific answer. We could look into it, and I guess associated with that, what's the level of effort it would take to actually do it? What's the cost associated with it? And what's the timeline to do that, while we were also considering preparations for what Nancy just described? Since we understand there's been changes on the ground, we would be accounting for those through the detailed study. Is it worth doing both at the same time? It will still resources, so it'll slow down the second to get the first one in place. Could be a potential consideration. So, and again, these are a great point. If we can't solve it today, if the value in looking into it persists, we can look into it as part of this partnership moving forward and see what it would take, and see what investment, and compare that value that we're anticipating with what we're already got going on with what we already have going on with the detailed study. So we can do those things.
Michael, thank you. I do believe we have another question from Paul Jepson, City of Globe Town Manager.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors, thank you again, Paul Jepson, City Manager, City of Globe. And not so much a question, I just wanted to take a quick second to thank the county for moving forward with this. We're very excited about this. Hasn't been done in 40 years. I think now is the time to take the time to do it right. I know they redo the maps and they reissue the maps, and things move around, and let's just take the time, get this thing nailed down. I know it's going to take some time, and we'll work for interim solutions to get there, but I'm very excited about this. And especially with the diversion tunnel, we're also looking at the core and what we can do to try to mitigate that. So I think that plays in also with the tunnel and the dam that we're worried about. Just wanted to let the Board of Supervisors know, we have a council meeting tonight. I will get do a quick update tonight to the council on this, and probably ask FEMA, we may ask you to come to the City of Globe and do a presentation about this, maybe trim it down a little bit, but we'll do our best to kind of share where the city role is, and the partnership is so important. I'm just excited about that. So we will get council up to speed, but knowing this council and knowing the importance of this issue, I know that they're going to be very excited also when they hear the full extent of what we're looking to do here. And other than that, unless there's any questions, thank you for your time and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else from the board? Homero, are you good with your questions and comments? Mr. Minlove, you're good? Okay, well, I would like to thank you very much, Michael and Nancy, for presenting to us today. It's very, very important in our area because we've had many difficulties. So we appreciate you with your presentation today. I appreciate you very much for working with us on helping solve some of these. And Homero, thank you very, very much. And Dart and James, because we're a board interested in infrastructure, and this has created a lot of issues for infrastructure and businesses and stuff coming to our area. So we appreciate it very, very much. And if there's anything that you need from us at any time, we'd be happy to work with you. And I'm sure Amy, our grant writer, would be able to look for any grants that we can to help with any processes that we can help with in going forward in getting these changes made. And yeah, there are going to be some people that are affected negatively and positively, but at least it'll be real. It won't be something that is not the way it's supposed to be. So I appreciate you very much in helping us get this taken care of. And if there's nothing further from anyone, appreciate your time. We'll move on. And I think moving on to 2B, I think we're going to take a little break because we need to make some phone calls to get other people online with our YouTube. And so we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before you take a break, got a couple of options here. Ms. Power has been on the phone, and this process of what we're going to establish our federal policies for the next year and what we are attempting to accomplish is probably a good hour and a half process, meaning that we're going to be extended to go 1 o'clock or even later. So the option is that we could continue to go ahead and do that, or I think what might be very critical at this point is for Patty to update us on the new administration that is in Washington, D.C., what the priorities are coming out as from Washington, D.C., and make us aware of that, and then perhaps reschedule in another month, next month, to have the discussion of what our priorities are and how they fit into the new administration and what their focus is going to be. So it's kind of a decision, Mr. Chairman, if you want to, what your preference would be.
Do we need a break for our IT? Do we need?
All I need is to be able to start the conference line so that Patty can call in to talk.
Okay, and then
she may be on already. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't believe she's on.
Okay.
From what I understand.
Okay.
And so what you're recommending is that we just continue and she kind of be at a minimum instead of a full hour and a half, and then we make a time down the road for another work session for her to present her full presentation.
Well, I'm just wondering that we've been through a very detailed presentation with FEMA that has a lot of information included in it. And that is all great to have that information. It's critical and important that we move forward with that analysis of our floodplain because of the errors that are included we currently have. A discussion on our legislative priorities is a very in-depth discussion as well. And so another hour and a half of a very in-depth discussion. Are we prepared to go that way, or?
Mr. Chair, you want my 2 cents?
Sure, Supervisor Klein, go ahead.
I'm here all day. You give me a few minutes to stretch my legs, I'm good to go.
Well, that's kind of what I asked for, is a 5-minute break, but
Okay.
and then we got it where I didn't know if we were going to just a short one and put it off, or go ahead, or what.
I'm fine with if we're prepared as a group to go ahead and go forward with that. That's great.
Okay,
And then
yeah,
take our short break.
I agree. We're here all day. It was on our agenda, so we're here for it. But it's been almost 2 hours, so we're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Are we good on, for IT with YouTube? Okay. Then we're going to go on to regular agenda item 2B, information discussion regarding an update on legislative activities in Washington, D.C. From Gila County federal lobbyist Patricia Power of BOS Public Affairs Group. And we'll start off with Mr. Minlow. We have...
from Gila federal lobbyist.
Oh, I'm getting feedback somewhere.
I'm wondering if Patty was also watching the YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Patty,
Yeah, so-
mute your YouTube audio.
So if I mute the YouTube, will that stop the feedback?
I think he said mute your YouTube, and then maybe that will stop the feedback. Not sure.
Okay, so I did that. Did it work?
It seemed to have worked. Yeah, I don't hear myself coming back
Okay,
at me
great.
anymore. Okay, Mr. Minlove.
Yeah, I was.
Okay,
was
Mr.
a little
Minlove's going to
delayed.
start this off. Patty, he'll probably revert to you here in just a minute.
Me too. Mr. Chairman, thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion about federal priorities and things that are going on in Washington, D.C. that may affect and will affect Gila County. I believe it's our preference that we go ahead and jump into hearing from each of the supervisors the priorities that you have for yourselves, your districts, for Gila County as a whole. And after that, then Ms. Power will jump in to give us an update of what's going on in Washington, D.C., how we can address the issues that you bring up as you identify your priorities. And so if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, we'd just go ahead and jump into a list of priorities from each of the supervisors.
Okay, Patty, is that okay with you if we go that direction?
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect approach.
Okay, then I'm going to start off with Co-Chairman Supervisor Steve Christensen.
Hello again, Patty. Steve Christensen here, and I'm supervisor for District 1, which essentially means the north part of the county. So the north part of the county has a lot of forested property. A lot of it is in the forest, the Tonto Forest. So a lot of dirt roads that are there that we maintain. They're Forest Service roads, key access roads, key evacuation roads if we have a wildfire, key access for the firefighters, things like that. And also one of the roads acts as a bypass between two highways, Highway 87 and Highway 260. However, the condition of the roads are not good to function in that way. So some of the concerns I have is wildfires. We have a lot of federal land there, and there's an awful lot to take care of and garden, if you will. In the forest, you know, we have hundreds of thousands of acres. It just seems like a ominous task, but we need to, we can't afford to do that ourselves. We have to have the Forest Service or Department of Interior or Agriculture, whoever it is, provide some money to try and trim things. Maybe we could even turn part of that into an economic boon with people that need those scraps, or logging, or the brush to create products, and they'd be willing to pay for the privilege to do it and clean up our forests at a profit. So those are some of the concerns that I have, mainly the general concerns. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but last meeting last week, Jackie Sanders had put together a paragraph really with 4 topics basically involved in it that we sent to Mark Kelly. And I would hope that you would receive a copy of that, and then maybe you would be able to get that to Mr. Gosar, or whoever else needs to have it, so we can push on that a little bit. Thank you.
You good?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Microphone,
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Klein.
Welcome again, Patty. Good to hear from you. So, Patty, one of the things we've been faced with and have had to deal with for the last 3-4 years is the fire suppression tactics on these wildfires. It's gotten to the point where it's just absolutely hammering us as a county and our constituents and private property and everything else. And I guess to put it real bluntly, it really has to change. There has to be some give in that. We need to change that around. The next thing I want to ask you, and I don't know if it may be a little early yet for you to see anything or be able to learn anything, but under President Trump, he had rolled back some of the NEPA regulations. Is President Biden gonna cancel those out and put those back into play? My guess was that he was, and so I was real curious because if he goes back to the way it was before President Trump, we're looking easily at 5+ years to ever get a NEPA document through on projects. So I'm real curious as to that. And of course, that has to do with everything that we do on the National Forest, whether it's logging, thinning, roads, whatever it is. That's going to just hammer us on that. The other thing that I'm getting bits and pieces, and I don't know if there's any truth to it, it's just secondhand, but what I'm hearing is that President Biden is rolling out executive orders when it pertains to our natural resources, especially programs such as their drought relief through the FSA, NRCS projects, things like that he's taken action against money there that's in that. So I'm real curious to know if that's a fact or if that's just rumor mill or whatever. And I think with that's probably about all I have, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, Patty. This is Chairman Humphrey. Good to visit with you again. The thing of it is I partner with Supervisor Klein on the way our forest fires are not fought. They're encouraged. When a car fire burns 200,000 acres, that's not firefighting. That's building fires. And in our community, we live on 3% of our tax base, and we depend on our cattle, our mining, and our recreation. In my district, between the Pinal fire, the Woodbury fire, and then the bush fire, they've burnt hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres, and a lot of it is moonscaped. There's not going to be able to be a cow in there for 5 years. And the thing of it is recreation. They've closed off a lot of the roads. We depend on our hunting and things of that nature, and a lot of these roads are closed because now there's flood danger, and so they're locking the Forest Service roads to keep us out. So the way they have not fought fires and have created fires, it's been really a negative impact for us, a major negative impact. And not only that, they burnt hundreds of miles of guardrail and fencing doing back burns when the fire didn't even get close to the 188 or the any of the other roads. And so, we really need to work on that, because I've heard tell that if there is a fire in Tano, they're going to encourage it to burn, which is I don't think a good thing to do, because they've sure done it the last couple years. So anyway, off of that, the 203 road was a major conversation for a long time in them doubling the wilderness area by keeping that road closed. Nobody hears about that anymore. I don't know if the change in Washington with our senators and stuff, if that has been buried or is not up on top of everybody's list, but it's still on the top of mind because, like I say, we live on recreation, and if you double the size of a wilderness area because you close a road between it and U.S. Forest Service, that affects us very much so. So those are kind of my two pet peeves off the top, and so I thank you very much, and welcome to our meeting today. I believe James Minlove has a comment for you.
Mr. Chairman, as we're coming in and the nature of things and how money's moving and the things that are coming up, I think there's a couple of more priorities that I would like to identify or list that we have as federal priorities, and it's partly in that letter that we sent to Senator Kelly. First of all, that addressing the coronavirus and businesses being able to, a lot of our businesses have taken a big hit in the economy, and so being able to have resources that we can use in working with businesses, being able to help them weather the storm. There are some businesses that have been closed and shuttered for a year now. The theater downtown Globe hasn't had any business for most all of a year. I don't know how you can keep operating in that way. So coronavirus funding that we can use to help businesses, to me, would be a priority for us here in Gila County. And another thing is, as we've learned with coronavirus, and this is maybe part of coronavirus funding, is the infrastructure for broadband. Everybody was sent home for a period of time, and the broadband is not robust here. It's not very efficient or effective in Gila County since we are so rural. A big problem being that we're 100 miles from any site of being able to attach into a broadband site. I don't know what you call it, a home base for the broadband. And so money directed for infrastructure, and if infrastructure is more broadly defined than just transportation, infrastructure for broadband in Gila County is essential to be able to ensure that we have communications in times of emergency, in times of pandemic or whatever it might be, that we can use it for education, for telemedicine, and other kinds of things. So broadband is a high priority, and it's very expensive. I think that we've looked at a project of about $70 million to get broadband to homes and businesses in Gila County. I just thrown a number out, but that may be, that's a lot of money, regardless of if it's less or more than that. It's still a lot of money, and so we would look to infrastructure bills that may be coming out for broadband and being able to, since we've been doing the study and an analysis, been working with Kimley Horn and being able to engineer, design broadband, we should and could be able to have some detail of a project that is, we can have some teeth, some details to put forward in that. Again, the roads for infrastructure as they come through, I think we prioritized in the meeting that the 512 road, the road to Young, there's about 16 miles left to get that paved, that money had been appropriated for that, and then they got about halfway done and then decided to take those appropriations and move them to other projects in Coconino County and perhaps in Apache County or something like that. But so there's that 16 miles of roads that still are needed there. The control road, the access for citizens, that communities all throughout the base of the rim, that if they get a wildfire up there, as Supervisor Christensen mentioned, it could be very devastating and risky to our citizens. And then also was mentioned the A Crossroad that goes around the backside of Roosevelt Lake.
Cherry Creek.
No, Cherry Creek.
A-Cross is the one that Minlove is talking about.
Yeah, A-Cross is the one that goes right on the back.
But we decided that wasn't as near as important.
Right.
As
that's a lower priority with that.
Yeah.
The Cherry Creek Road is the one that Supervisor Humphrey talked about, of the wilderness, that the 203 road, that the wilderness encroached upon the road and it's no longer passable because it's a wilderness area. And finally, I'll throw one out there that was Supervisor Martin's champion. She championed was the watershed for Cece Kragen Reservoir. That is an extremely choked forest and very dense. And if it was to go up in flames, it would just absolutely torch the ground, make it hard as granite, or however hard it gets. But that the topsoil, if we had rains after that area was to burn, that could potentially very much or fill up the Cece Kragen Reservoir. And a lot of money has been spent for a water supply for northern Gila County, for the Payson area. And were there to be a fire in that watershed, it could eliminate that resource that we have for northern Gila County of a consistent water source for those citizens. So I think those are some that I've been considering as far as priorities for Gila County.
Thank you, James. Patty, you did receive a copy of that list that we sent to the senator, I would hope?
I did get a copy of the letter.
Okay, yeah, that's why I didn't include any of that in my comments, because I figured that you knew those. I was just going to kind of throw some at you that weren't on there. So I appreciate that very much. Yeah. And anything else, Supervisor Klein?
I do, Chairman. Thank you. One more thing, Patty, to catch you up on. I haven't talked to you in quite a while. We just recently got our lease on the admin site that we wanted to turn into veteran services from the Forest Service. So we're going through it right now just to make sure that it's all what me and the ranger have been discussing. Then we're going to turn it over to the attorneys, and then it'll be back up in front of us as a board. But one of the parts of this process was the lease was going to be first, and then Congressman Gosar wrote a bill, and Congressman O'Halloran co-sponsored it to transfer the ownership of that site to the county. And so I don't know what you got going, or if you didn't even get up there to talk to those folks, but maybe find out where we are on that bill and what their plans are for pushing it forward. I know that Grijalva was a kind of a obstacle in that process, but hopefully Congressman O'Halloran can work that one out. But I'm really curious to see, since we got this other part of it done, basically, where we are with the final step on that.
Thank you, Supervisor Klein. Patty, it's floor is yours.
So they didn't introduce that bill yet, though, right?
Patty, no, not that I'm aware of. Everything's been kind of upside down in D.C., and getting information out of there has been tough.
Well, let me check with them, and the ideal thing would be to, very near the same time, to get the senators to drop the same bill. And typically what happens on these bills, these, relatively focused, smaller land bills, is they get moved in a package. They just moved one recently, but they'll do them throughout the year. So, can you not hear me?
Yeah. We're working on a little bit more volume coming from you, but go ahead.
Okay, is that better?
I think it is.
It's getting better, yes.
It's different.
Yeah, but I'll follow up with them and let you know. But that's great news on that. I watched your video this morning when I logged onto the YouTube channel, and it made me think about using that to support work on the 512 road, because as it is now, it's not it'd be hard to pitch the 512 road as a regional project, because it's just going into Pleasant Valley. But if it's set up as a regional or broader veterans facility, that really changes the purpose of that road. So he's sort of a a +1 on that.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, Patty, I guess it's your turn.
Okay, and just wave at me because I can see you if you
Okay.
if you can't hear me well enough. And thank you all for the update. I assume you all know that James and his team and I talk once a month at least about what's going on. So it's not that I've not been plugged in with you guys, but I have missed my visit out there. You know, normally would do that sometime in the winter. So as soon as we can get back on the road, I look forward to coming back out and seeing you. And NACO too. So you know, we'll do that virtually this year and see how it goes. But I just wanted to give you kind of a really quick update on what's the main focus of activity, especially on Capitol Hill. It's pretty much since I'm going to say December. It's been all COVID all the time. We reached a terrible milestone yesterday, and you know the thoughts of just not having this virus under control is just driving you know a lot more activity. So right now, the House of Representatives is in the midst of considering the American Relief Plan, which is a $1.9 trillion COVID plan. It includes a range of things to fund, similar to what the big bills that have moved the last two, similar kinds of issues. Getting kids back to school, a lot on the public health side, funding for testing and contact tracing, testing for vaccines, everything and anything to do with the vaccines, manufacturing, delivery, encouraging people to get them. There is in this bill, as there's been in other House bills that have not survived, additional funding for state and local government. The provision that's in this bill is a total of, it's $350 billion. A piece of that goes just to funding some federal programs, but the bulk of it would be split 60-40 between states and local governments. There's a bucket of money that works out to about $65 billion that would be distributed directly from the Treasury Department to counties. They have used a pro rata or a population-based formula to determine how much every county would get. And Gila County on one chart came in at 11 million. I think they rounded numbers up on that chart, and I think James found another estimate that was, I think NACO did an estimate that was a little more to the detail, and I think it's a little bit closer to $10.5 million. Those funds have a broader focus than the CARES Act CRF funds, so they can be used for any expenses related to COVID, as well as replacing any revenue lost due to COVID. There is as it's written now, there's no deadline by which you have to spend the funds. You know, I guess the implicit deadline is that it's, you know, if you run out of COVID-related expenses, then you've hit your deadline. There will be no interference from the state on these funds because they're going to come directly from the Treasury Department. So, I mean, this is pretty much what all of the major local government groups and the county has been following up on those requests, has been asking Congress to do. The House is expected to pass this bill on Friday, or if they don't get through debate by then, they'll take it through the weekend. But the speaker said they're going to stay there until they pass it, and then we'll go over to the Senate. So, I mean, and I should have started with this, but I mean, you all know, so right now the Democrats control both the Senate and the House. The margins are very, very tight. I think the House has 5 vote lead, and then the Senate is 50-50, 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans. So if a vote comes up in a tie, then the vice president casts the deciding vote. So, you know, in essence, the Democrats control the Senate, but very, very close. So basically, if it's going to be a simple majority vote, the Democrats need to either keep all of their caucus in line, or they need to pick up a couple of Republican senators if they have any defectors. So, it makes for sort of an interesting dynamic watching these things move through. I don't want to get into the weeds on Senate rules. I think you guys spent a long time today in the FEMA weeds, so I won't do that to you. But they're moving this bill through what's called a reconciliation process. And the most important thing to know about that is under reconciliation, the filibuster rules in the Senate do not apply. So the Senate could pass this bill on a simple majority vote. So what's expected? They're watching a couple of senators. One of your senators actually, Kristen Sinema, has voiced some objections to some of the things in the bill. For example, the $15 federal minimum wage requirement. I think they'll continue to figure out all of those issues, but it is expected that this bill will pass and it will look pretty close to what they're looking at. There's been a little bit of rumbling of late, like really just yesterday, today, about the level of funding for the local government piece. And we'll just see how that plays out. But that's what's happening on that front. What's coming, though, is what I would like you to spend some time thinking about, and hopefully we can talk about again sometime in the near future, is 2 things. One is the second COVID bill that the president has talked about is to be not really a bill to address specific costs to fix things that COVID has broken, but more of an overall economic recovery bill with a heavy emphasis on infrastructure. And as James mentioned, I think lots of times people think of infrastructure as equating that to maybe roads and sewers, but what they're looking at is a much broader definition of infrastructure. Roads, airports, bridges, all sorts of communication, definitely broadband, in some cases housing, schools, school construction. I mean, it's a pretty broad list of things that they're looking at funding. They're in an unusual position this year in that they have 2 shots at a reconciliation approach, and they might take this one through another reconciliation process depending on how this first one goes. So I think that most people that have been watching this closely at this point feel that this infrastructure package could be a pretty generous one. So we don't know that yet, but on the chance that it is, I would recommend that you all consider what you would want to put on your wish list if something like that starts to come together. And it's not clear exactly what the bill would look like if they would list projects or they would list descriptions of projects, but it would be very helpful to sort of, to know what would be on that list. So a lot of the things mentioned before I started, would definitely be on that list. Broadband for sure. And depending on how big this goes, and people have been talking about it getting pretty big, trying to secure something like $1 million for broadband might be possible. or some subset of that. So I guess I would urge you to dream big. Let's get a list together, and then we can pare it back once, if we need to, once we see how it all sorts out. And again, the way it's going to work is not clear. I mean, they may end up dumping a lot of money into existing formula programs or existing discretionary grant programs like BUILD. And BUILD, if you remember, was originally the Tiger Grant program, and that was part of the ARA bill that was passed in 2009 to try to enhance the economic recovery from the 2008 recession. So I think all of that is going on, but I think the main takeaway is thinking about what sorts of projects you'd want to see funded if something like that was to come forward. And another issue I think that sort of wasn't necessarily on your specific project list, but has been on the what we need to fix list is in the last two transportation authorization bills, they have consolidated and really shrunken the funding programs for forest roads and federal roads. Where there used to be a number of places you could apply for grants and get funding for forest road improvements, a lot of that has just disappeared over the last 8 to 10 years. So trying to get attention back on that, on a little bit more money in that bucket would be helpful. And then we also always watch out for the cost share issue, because I think it was now three, it's one of the ICE-T bills, 3 highway authorization bills ago, the county lost its designation as a high percentage federal land state. So all of your federal cost share on highway projects went from 5.7% to 20%. We were able to get that fixed in follow-up with the technical corrections bill, but it's just something we always want to make sure that all of the members of the delegation are well aware that that's something we don't want to have to see slide back, because that costs you money for every federal dollar that comes in. It's not insignificant. So in addition to just planning for this big infrastructure bill, which we might see sometime this spring, is the annual appropriations process. So you all have come to office during the earmark ban, but back in the good old days, we used to be able to work with our delegation to get specific projects earmarked. And then you didn't need to go apply for grants to the Forest Service or the Department of Transportation. They just had to give you the money for the project. Last Monday, there was not an announcement, but sort of a we're thinking about it kind of leak, that both the Senate and House Appropriations Committees were going to reopen earmarks. They'd be limited to local governments and nonprofits, I think, which would include things like schools and hospitals. But that would be really big news. By the end of the week, there are a couple of Republicans in the House that introduced a bill to permanently ban earmarks. And the Democrats haven't come back out yet to say exactly what they want to do with that. But right now, the county has, out of your 4 members of the congressional delegation, 3 of them are Democrats. So I think you'd be in good shape to get projects listed. I don't know where Mr. Gosar will land on this. I think there are members of this caucus that are opposed to it, but in discussions with him over the years, my impression was that he always appreciated the value of earmarks, especially to rural communities. So we'll have to see how that sorts out. But that would be another place where, the county wants to come up with a list of what you want to get funded. And this is the really hard part, is for projects that would fall within the same bucket, so would go to the same subcommittee, say roads, for example. It's very helpful if you submit those requests prioritized. If you don't prioritize them, like the best case is that the congressional office will do that for you. Some congressional offices, if you don't prioritize them, put them on the bottom of their list that they're getting in from everybody that's submitting them requests. So that's something to think about as well.
Mr. Chairman?
And, you know, again, we can talk more about that. I can organize this list into, you know, which kinds of projects would be in the same bucket. But those are the sort of the big updates on funding issues headed your way. The fire
Patty?
suppression
Patty, if you could
project,
hold just a second. Before you go on to another subject, I think Mr. Minlump has a comment or question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in these lists that we're talking about for each of the different types of funding that may be coming forward, is it, do we like for, I'll just use the Young Road for an example, the 512 road, that it's roughly $1 million a mile and 15 or 16 miles. So the request for that particular road could be $16 million. Is that something that's in the realm of money that we can put forward, that we can expect? Or is it on these, just for example, the 512 road, do we need to break that up into sections that are closer to, say, $5 million per request? Or in putting the list together, what are the proper chunks of money, I guess, that should be submitted or put on the list to be requested?
I missed the beginning of that, James. You're asking me that question, right?
Yes.
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 Okay, yeah, it's harder for me to hear you guys. I'm just on my phone. So that depends on what we would be doing with the particular list. So you know, I think it's it would be good to have a very comprehensive list that we would be able to plug into whatever opportunity we get to have input into this big economic recovery infrastructure bill. And as I said, I don't know any of the details on that yet. I mean, some of the things that we do know is this administration is very focused on climate change. They're very focused on diversity issues, environmental justice kinds of issues. So, you know we want to figure out how to describe these needs in those terms. But, you know, what caps would be, things like that, I don't know yet. On appropriations, you'd want definitely smaller chunks. I mean, they would never appropriate 15 or 16 million these days at a time. But, you know, it might be worth it to, you know, we ultimately are going to need two lists, or maybe we have one list and with two columns, one for, you know, if we could have everything we wanted, and then the other column would be like, what could we do with in a year? Because that's, so appropriations happen every year. This other program would be, you know, it would be the whole shot. It's going to be more of an authorization bill, but I think that they'll also put the money in it too.
Okay, Patty. Mr. Chairman, is it okay to put a list of everything that we might want, or, you know, just at least if we've got 5 road projects that we want to look at, is it okay to put all 5, but that we need to prioritize them? Or do we need to just put the top road project and maybe a second one and prioritize those 2?
That was another question,
are you
Patty.
asking me?
Yes, Patty.
So it depends on what the purpose is. You know, I think, again, you know, for appropriations, you know, they haven't done earmarks in a really long time, so we'll have to see how each office wants to handle it. But, I mean, generally what what they're faced with is they get all these requests in, and then they are limited, each office. So there's 435 members of Congress. They're each limited when they go into the subcommittee with how much they can ask for. Or they know they're only going to get like their first 3 or 5 requests. So, I think we can, that should be a specific discussion when we get to that point. But, initially I think it would be really good to get, a list together of if this is going to be this big package, this once a decade, once a generation kind of New Deal kind of, here we go package. What does the county want to do? And again, I mean, broadband, I think, is your perfect example. It's county-wide, it's transformative. You can address a lot of the issues that they want to see addressed. It would present economic development opportunities. It would improve education. It could improve health. People were able to effectively use telehealth. Maybe they would be treated more often than if they had to travel a long way. Anyway, I would be thinking in sort of in those terms, but I wouldn't leave off things like the road projects either. And to the extent that they're going to be looking at what buckets have been neglected and need to be attended to. I think your forest roads, when you're talking climate change, that you can, you have road access to get in and properly maintain the forest will be pretty critical for climate change purposes. So, I mean, we can think about how to package it, but it would be good to, just to have that list of really what you would want to get accomplished.
So, Mr. Chairman,
and like I said, I mean, this is a pretty good list that you just gave, plus the letter. If it would be helpful, I could sort of put that together in a format that we could work with and just keep working on this. If this doesn't have, this isn't like a deadline today. We need to get this all settled.
So, Mr. Chairman, Patty, I think what we as staff need to do is to put together a comprehensive list of all of our priorities that we have, and then to break that down into palatable chunks, per se, and identify the different steps of different processes and how much each step might cost in broadband or whatever it might be, and then present that to you. And I think, based on the letter that was sent to Senator Kelly, that there's been a priority established, but that we can have a further discussion on that as a board at a time when we've got that list put together and we can review it together.
Okay. Patty, you're back on the floor.
Okay, and I think that's sort of the most critical at the moment. I think some of these other issues, most of the things that we've talked about are kind of money-related things, but not everything. So, I mean, pretty much, Woody, none of your issues were. The fire suppression tactics, Vicki Christensen is still there. I think you guys probably know Liz Archuleta is the head of intergovernmental relations at the Agriculture Department now. So we have a very friendly face there. But, I've not heard this as an issue widely discussed. So, I think that there's, what's been going on is really pretty terrible. I mean, we've been focused on dealing with NRCS, trying to get them to clean it up, but the problem, that's not the only problem. The problem is the backburning that created such a mess in the first place. So we need to think about elevating that as an issue with the Forest Service. And maybe the first step is to bring it up with the delegation. It's, it's a lot harder these days when you can't go in and sit down and talk to them. But I could set up a series of meetings, Zoom meetings. I mean, that's pretty much all everybody's doing anyway. The Hill is not doing any live meetings, and have it very focused on that issue, and just have a discussion with each of the offices and see what they're willing to do to help.
So
the executive order issue, Woody, I don't remember reading anything about the NRCS projects. There have been a lot of executive orders since the 20th of January. They did repeal some of the NEPA changes. I can go through and review it and see how that looks and let you know. And then I'll check the other EOs too to see if there was anything else that looked like it very directly related what the county's been doing. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I've sort of skimmed them. And Steve, you know, the forest maintenance issues have been a top priority for many years. I think that they've improved their record some, but they have a long way to go. They have finally, after years of banging on the door about this, have changed the way they budget in the Forest Service. They always, every year would run out of money in their fire suppression budget and rob the fire prevention budget, which is just sort of shocking, to hear that for the first time, that's how the federal government ran things. But that's what they would do. So they would never have enough money for prevention because they were every year spending more money on suppression. So they fixed that, and so I think there should be more funding available for fire prevention, but it's still not enough. And I mean, maybe that's an item that goes on the list for infrastructure. Getting enough money in to properly maintain the forest.
Well, Patty, the history of the Forest Service has been changing. So they, and like what Chairman Humphrey was talking about, they've now changed from fighting fires to expanding fires. And that's so obvious with this last one. I've noticed it's been obvious for several years, couple decades. When we had the Dude Fire 30 years ago, they tried to put it out. And now, ever since my first remembrance was the Willow Fire, which was back probably 18 or so years ago, where it started in the Matazelle Wilderness, and before you know it, they were burning everything from every highway, every road, and expanded it to well over 60,000 acres instead of just putting it out. So that's their method of managing the forest now, to just burn it all and create then flood problems and, well, many problems. So the Forest Service used to issue grazing rights. They still do, but, that was part of help to do it. They had selective logging. We no longer really do that. We have biofuel companies that want to come in and get the brush and all the things that are really the serious problem, and yet we can't seem to get that done. So whether it's environmentalists or whoever is blocking all of this or just bad management, the forests are not being saved healthier. They're just literally being destroyed with fire every year. So if you want to save the forest, something needs to change.
I agree with you completely. I think you're probably aware one of Supervisor Martin's priorities was working with the 4-5 process, and I think that would be the Forest Service answer to expanding the usefulness of forests, especially forests such as the Tonto. But that has been disappointingly slow to progress as well. But they are looking at a much larger footprint for these projects, and that one is a national preview, so it gets a lot of attention, but it's still moving pretty slowly, and I know it's a top priority for Representative Gosar.
Patty,
Go ahead.
do you? I met with someone just on the phone that has developed a sprinkler system that's pretty dynamic to protect communities. It can be put together fairly inexpensively. It's to try and prevent the overrun of a fire into the community. It becomes sort of like a fence with sprinklers on it and with pumps, and all this stuff's just kind of ready to go. Not super expensive, but it does create a border of water along a community, which seems to be an immediate protection versus trying to figure out how to thin the forest every year or every other year for decade after decade. Do you think there'd be money in something like that as an infrastructure or some other form of emergency management?
I don't know. I can check it out. We haven't really done any work on the suppression side. So I'm not familiar with how they evaluate technologies and what they choose to use. I know. I mean, it's the county did on its own back in 2006 into 2007 develop the bladder and buckets system. That has been very, very successful since then to keep major fires out of the county. So, it's I think on your own you can do that sort of thing. It would be another question, as to what we could get them to fund. But there was some federal funding that supported that. I have to go back and look. It was a long, long time ago. But yeah, we can check that out.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, on that note, just to, with Mr. Christensen, we have the YouTube video on that too, that, Patty, we could ship out there to you and you could see this thing operate. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, incredibly effective. I mean, Tommy testified a couple of times about it. It's, I always thought that they'd pick it up and run with it around the country because it's sort of community managed and controlled, but in coordination with all the fire districts, whatever the states have going on, and then the Forest Service. And it was, it just made a lot of sense. It was, she always touted redneck ingenuity as the answer to that problem. So
it was. And Mr. Chair, one more thing, Patty, a lot of that infrastructure that Tommy put in place back when, those bladders and those tanks, a lot of our bladders are becoming faulty. And it's already proven its usefulness as far as a resource. So, when you're sitting here talking about lists and things like that, that is one that we could definitely throw some money at and see a return. Because we used the old excess bladders from years ago. Now that they've been out there in the environment and everything, they're starting to leak and everything, and they're hard to repair, and there's none left. So we're basically going to be looking at having to replace them with either metal tanks or poly tanks or something else that's going to be fairly costly. But it's just a tremendous resource for suppression.
Yeah. It's those were, if I remember right, those were excess Desert Storm drinking water bladders.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That someone in the county found at a Defense Department auction. So it's an amazing story. Yeah, I mean that would be the kind of thing, Woody, I would definitely put on the list. I mean, I think you could get a lot of support from the Forest Service for saying that that's been a very effective system. So yeah, I'll put on the list to take a look at their suppression dollars. We can get them through grants, or how we would get those dollars for systems.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Klein, is that any more?
Right now, I'm good, Tim. Thank you.
You good? Okay, Patty, the floor is yours if you have something you want to cover.
I think that's probably enough for today.
Okay, Mr.
Do you have any
Minlove.
questions?
Now we'll check and see. Mr. Minlove, questions?
I've asked mine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Christensen?
Thank you. No questions.
Supervisor Klein?
Patty, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah,
It was good to see you all, so I'll be back in touch through James, but it's going to be a busy few months here.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for keeping a watch on Washington, because our needs list, as you say, would probably depend on which direction that Washington's wanting to go, because some of our major projects might not be what we could get funded, but in a different direction, we might stand a better chance for funding further down our list. So we appreciate you keeping a watch out and helping us with that.
Absolutely, and I think, we can be creative in packaging them. The needs too. I think it's doable. But I've mentioned this to everybody, Steve. So for my first shot to you is I can only guarantee you that you will not get what you need if you don't ask for it. So we want to be in a position to ask. It doesn't mean we'll get it, but we don't want to ever lose an opportunity to express to the folks in D.C. what you need back in Gila County.
Okay, I thank you very much and appreciate you being here today. And if that's all, I'm going to go on with our meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Moving on to number 3, call to the public. Do we have any public that cares to address the board in Payson today?
No, sir.
I don't see anyone here in Globe. Do we have anyone on YouTube that would care to address? No one on YouTube. Okay, then we will move on to 4. At any time during the meeting pursuant to ARS 38-431.02K, members of the Board of Supervisors and County Manager may present brief summary of current events. No action may be taken on information presented. Mr. Minlove, do you have something to share with us today?
Mr. Chairman, yes. Just wanted to point out that this weekend, Saturday and Sunday in Payson, we're having a coronavirus vaccination clinic, and there are 1,900 shots that are available. And there, as of yesterday, there was 1,324 that had signed up, and so I want to put out there that there are still some spots available for vaccinations this weekend. Make sure to take advantage of those up in the northern area of the county, and we are to the point that everybody is eligible throughout the county. Any resident in the county can be eligible for these vaccinations. So just want to give that message to take advantage of that, the vaccination clinics this weekend. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Christensen.
Thank you, Chairman. I do not have anything to share at this time.
Supervisor Klein.
I think I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, and I think I'm good today. So now that we're finished with that, I would like to thank the people on YouTube that checked in with us today. Appreciate you tuning in. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.